Welcome to English 7, Unit 05, Lesson 6. This is the Oral Tradition Assessment Rehearsal Video Overview. I am so thrilled to guide you through this explainer today. We've got some incredibly fascinating concepts to lock down. And, my main goal is just to make sure you're totally prepared and super confident for your upcoming assessment. Let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit exploding oral tradition myths, look at some evidence from the archives, do a storytelling scenario analysis, practice a claim evidence reasoning rehearsal, explore an audience and context shift, and then wrap it all up with a summary and final thoughts. All right, Section 1, Exploding Oral Tradition Myths. It is so easy for us to look at oral traditions through this modern text-biased lens. We kind of tend to think that if a story isn't written down in a physical book, it's somehow, less official, almost like it's just inaccurate written literature, like a flawed game of telephone. But actually, scratch that. The reality is that oral tradition is this living, incredibly dynamic community performance. It is intentionally passed by word of mouth among communities across generations. It's a completely active, breathing art form. And here's another really common trap we fall into, the myth that every single oral story fits neatly into one fixed genre. But reality is so much richer than that. If you look at the American Folklife Center archives, they show us that these stories almost never fit into just one simple box. A single story might beautifully weave together elements of magic tales, tall tales, animal trickster legends, and belief tales, literally all at once. It's amazing. Okay, we also really need to dispel this third myth, the completely false idea that retelling a story has absolutely no effect on its meaning. Think about it for a second. The reality is that every single time a story is told, the teller, the audience, and the context are actively shaping what it means. Whether the story is spoken or maybe sung, like the beautiful traditions of the Bengali Patua scroll storytellers we see, the teller and the audience are essentially creating the meaning together, right there in real time. Moving right along to Section 2, Evidence from the Archives. Now, a really crucial point we need to make here is that access to every cultural story is absolutely not unrestricted. It's not a free-for-all. The Library of Congress explicitly outlines specific restrictions for Indigenous storytelling based on a few things: seasonality, the occasion, the topic, the specific teller, the audience, and of course, community permission. As researchers, we have to be equally respectful and understand that these boundaries, these rules, are absolutely vital to the tradition itself. Now, don't get me wrong, archival collections do incredible work preserving the voices of some highly esteemed storytellers. We're talking amazing recordings from artists like Tim Tingle, a celebrated Choctaw storyteller, and Mary Louise Defender Wilson, a deeply respected Dakota and Hidatsa elder. These recordings pass along profound cultural wisdom, bridging generations. But we do have to acknowledge one fundamental truth here. The archive is not the live performance. Not even close. And that brings us to a really important limitation check. See, even with the absolute best archival metadata and perfectly written transcripts, we inherently lose that real-time interactive magic between the teller and the audience. This is what we call our human check. Because if you're analyzing, say, a 1940s wire recording of an oral tale, you're missing the physical gestures of the storyteller. You're missing the crackle of the fire, the immediate gasps or laughs from the audience. Basically, all these essential elements that actively shape the story's true meaning. So, let's put this into practice. Section 3, Storytelling Scenario Analysis. I want you to imagine this scenario with me. A respected elder tells a seasonal lesson tale to a group of youth around a winter fire. Now ask yourself, how does this specific performance affect the story's meaning? Really think about the variables we have here. We've got an elder, we've got youth, we're in the winter season, and there's a fire. How do those very specific elements come together to actually create meaning? Let's break that down. Section 4, Claim, Evidence, Reasoning, Rehearsal. Okay, follow along with these 3 steps for a solid CER. Step 1 is our claim. The performance context actively shapes the moral weight of the story. Makes sense, right? Then, step 2, we back that claim up with evidence from our scenario. The teller is a respected elder, the audience is youth, and the setting is an intimate winter fire. Finally, step 3, our reasoning. The generational gap between the elder and the youth, combined with the seasonal intimacy of that winter fire, demands respect and focus. It literally turns what might seem like a simple narrative into a vital community lesson. Do you see how connecting that very specific evidence to our claim proves that the retelling and the context drastically change what the story means?
All right, Section 5, Audience and Context Shift.
Let's push this just one step further and really test our mastery by changing the variables. In our original context, we had community insiders gathered in a winter. But in our new context, let's say outside researchers arrive in the middle of the summer. I want you to consider how this dramatic shift changes the entire dynamic of the oral tradition.
Ask yourself this question. What happens to the interpretation or even our access choices when the audience and the season suddenly change? Take a brief moment here. Think back to those Library of Congress restrictions we discussed earlier and apply them directly to this new scenario.
Well, here are the results of that shift. Based on our evidence, access to this story may be respectfully restricted in this new context. And why is that? First off, the story violates seasonal rules. Telling a specific winter story in the summer goes straight against cultural guidelines. Second, that intimate elder-to-youth moral meaning we just identified, that is completely lost on a group of outside researchers. A storyteller might rightfully refuse to tell the tale to outsiders in the summer. And that completely proves our earlier point. Access is not unrestricted, and context is absolutely everything. Which brings us to Section 6, Summary and Final Thoughts. All right, here is your ultimate assessment checklist. Remember these 5 key takeaways. Oral tradition is incredibly dynamic, not just broken text. Stories span multiple genres. Context, meaning the teller, the audience, the season, defines the meaning. Always respect cultural access restrictions. And finally, master your claim evidence reasoning to prove your points. Keep this checklist in your mind, and honestly, you won't just be ready to ace your assessment, you'll be ready to hear the hidden depths in every single story you encounter. So, the next time you hear a story passed down, ask yourself, what is the context telling me that the words alone aren't? Unit 05, Lesson 06, Oral Tradition, Assessment Rehearsal Video Overview.